What you're about to hear sounds unbelievable, but every word of it is true. If you love unexpected twists, hit that like button and stay until the end. And when you hear the final reveal, tell me, did you see it coming?
She was sold to a monster. On their wedding night, she ran. He caught her, and in that moment, pinned against cold marble with his hand at her throat, Adriana Vale made a choice that would ignite a war neither could win alone. If you want to see how a bride became a queen and a ruthless crime lord learned to kneel, stay until the end. And when you're done, hit that like button and drop a comment with your city. I want to see how far this story travels across the world. Chat. The dress cost more than her father's debts. Adriana Vale stood in the bridal suite of the DeLuca estate, staring at herself in a mirror framed in gold she hadn't asked for, wearing silk she hadn't chosen, about to marry a man she'd never loved. The gown clung to her like a shroud, white, pristine, suffocating. Somewhere downstairs, 300 guests drank champagne that cost more per bottle than her mother's medical bills. Somewhere beyond these walls, her father was probably spending the blood money he'd gotten for selling his daughter. And somewhere in this vast, cold mansion, Matteo DeLuca was waiting. She'd seen him only twice before tonight. Once, across a restaurant where he'd sat with men who looked like they buried bodies for a living. The second time, he'd come to her father's house to finalize the arrangement. He hadn't looked at her like a bride. He'd looked at her like a contract being signed. Adriana pressed her palm against the mirror, feeling the cool glass against her skin. Her reflection looked like a stranger. Dark hair swept up in an elaborate style that took 2 women 3 hours to complete. Makeup that made her look older, harder, like she belonged in this world of marble and menace. Diamond earrings that weighed heavy as chains. She was 24 years old, she was a prisoner, and tonight was her wedding night. The door opened behind her. "It's time, Miss Vale." The woman who entered was older, severe, dressed in black. She'd introduced herself as Mrs. Castellano, head of household staff. Her eyes held no warmth. "Mr. DeLuca is waiting." Adriana didn't move. "What if I said no?" "Then I would remind you that the choice has already been made." Mrs. Castellano's voice was flat, emotionless. "Your father signed the papers. The priest is ready. The guests are seated. This is not a negotiation." "It never was it?" Something flickered in the older woman's expression, not sympathy, but recognition. "No, it never is. For women like us." Adriana turned from the mirror. "What happens after?" "After the ceremony, there's a reception. After the reception, you'll come back here. Mr. DeLuca will join you." Mrs. Castellano paused. "What happens then is between you and your husband." The word tasted like poison. Husband. "And if I run?" "You won't make it past the gates." The older woman's voice carried absolute certainty. "There are 12 men on the grounds tonight, all of them loyal to the DeLuca family, all of them armed." Adriana's hands curled into fists beneath the waterfall of silk and lace. "So I'm a prisoner." "You're a bride," Mrs. Castellano corrected. "In this world, those words often mean the same thing." She swept from the room, leaving Adriana alone with her reflection and the crushing weight of inevitability. Go. The ceremony was a performance. Adriana walked down an aisle lined with flowers that must have cost a fortune, past faces she didn't know, toward a man who stood at the altar like a king accepting tribute. Matteo DeLuca wore a black suit that probably cost more than a car, his dark hair swept back, his expression unreadable. He was handsome in the way a blade was beautiful, sharp, cold, dangerous. Their eyes met as she reached the altar. His were dark brown, almost black, and they revealed nothing. No warmth, no desire. Just assessment, as if he were calculating the value of an acquisition. The priest spoke in rapid Italian. Adriana understood maybe half of it. She heard the words honor and obey and death do you part, and felt her throat tighten. When it came time for vows, Matteo's voice was low, controlled. "I do." The priest turned to her. 300 people waited in silence. Adriana's voice came out steady, even though her heart was hammering. "I do." It was the biggest lie she'd ever told. Matteo slipped a ring onto her finger, platinum, embedded with diamonds that caught the light like shards of ice. His hand was warm, his grip firm. For just a moment, his thumb brushed across her knuckles. Not a caress, a reminder. You belong to me now. You may kiss the bride. Matteo leaned in. Adriana's breath caught. His hand came up to cup her jaw, tilting her face toward his, and for one suspended moment, she thought she saw something flicker in those dark eyes. Hesitation, maybe, or calculation. Then his lips touched hers. The kiss was brief, controlled, utterly without passion. A performance for the audience, a seal on a contract. When he pulled back, he kept his hand on her jaw for a moment longer than necessary, his eyes locked on hers. Then he released her and turned to face their guests, his hand settling possessively on the small of her back. The applause was deafening. Adriana smiled until her face hurt. The reception was a nightmare dressed in crystal and champagne. Adriana sat at a head table that felt like a throne and a cage combined. Matteo beside her, accepting congratulations from men who looked like they'd killed people and women who looked like they'd watched it happen. Every handshake was a calculation. Every smile was a weapon. Every toast was a threat wrapped in good wishes. To the happy couple, someone said, raising a glass. May your union bring prosperity to both families. What he meant was, may this alliance keep us all from killing each other. Matteo's hand remained on Adriana's throughout the dinner, sometimes on her shoulder, sometimes on her thigh, always possessive. She forced herself not to flinch. Every touch was a message to the room. Mine, my property, my wife. You're doing well, he murmured at one point, his lips close to her ear. Keep smiling. I'm not your performing monkey. No. His hand tightened on her thigh, not painful, but firm. You're my wife, which means you smile, you look happy, and you don't embarrass me in front of 300 witnesses. Can you do that, Adriana? She turned to meet his eyes, her smile never wavering. Can you stop touching me like I'm property you just purchased? But you are. His voice was soft, deadly. Or did you forget the part where your father sold you to clear his gambling debts? The words hit like a slap. Adriana's smile faltered. Matteo's expression didn't change, but something cold flickered in his eyes. There it is. The truth. You hate this. You hate me. But you're going to sit here and you're going to play your part because that's the only choice you have left. I always have a choice. Do you? He leaned closer, his voice dropping to a whisper only she could hear. Then choose this. Smile and survive the night, or fight me and find out what happens when you become more trouble than you're worth. Adriana felt ice slide down her spine, but she met his gaze without flinching. Is that a threat? It's reality. Matteo lifted his champagne glass, his other hand still resting on her thigh. Welcome to my world, Mowgli. You're going to learn the rules very quickly. Mowgli? Wife? She hated how the word sounded in his voice. Arakiet. The party lasted until midnight. Adriana danced with men whose names she'd never remember, accepted congratulations from women who looked at her with something between pity and contempt, and drank enough champagne to dull the edges of panic, but not enough to lose control. Matteo never left her side. His hand was always there, on her back, her arm, her waist, claiming, marking, reminding everyone in the room that she belonged to him now. When the clock struck 12, he leaned in close. Time to go. Adriana's heart lurched. Go where? Our suite. His voice was flat, matter-of-fact. The guests are leaving. The show is over. He stood, offering his hand. Adriana stared at it like it was a snake. Don't make a scene, Matteo warned quietly. Not here. Not now. She took his hand because 300 people were watching and because she didn't have a choice. His fingers closed around hers, warm and strong, and he led her from the ballroom like a king leading his queen from court. Except she wasn't a queen. She was a prisoner being led back to her cell. They walked through corridors lined with paintings worth more than houses, past staff who melted into shadows, up a grand staircase that seemed to climb forever. Matteo's stride was long, confident. Adriana's heels clicked against marble, each step taking her closer to a future she didn't want. They reached a set of double doors carved with intricate designs. Matteo pushed them open. The suite beyond was enormous. A sitting room with leather furniture and floor-to-ceiling windows overlooking the estate grounds. A bedroom visible through an archway, dominated by a massive four-poster bed. Everything was dark wood and deep colors: burgundy, black, gold. Masculine, powerful, cold. Matteo closed the doors behind them. The click of the lock was the loudest sound Adriana had ever heard. She turned to face him, her back to the windows, her heart hammering against her ribs. Matteo shrugged off his jacket, draping it over a chair. He loosened his tie, his movements casual, unhurried. "You can take off the dress. I'll have Mrs. Castellano bring you something more comfortable." "I'm fine." "You're not fine, you're terrified." He poured himself a drink from a crystal decanter, the amber liquid catching the light. "But you don't have to be." "Don't I?" Adriana's voice was sharp. "I was just sold into marriage to a man I don't know. A man who—" She stopped herself. "A man who what?" Matteo took a sip of his drink, watching her over the rim of the glass. "Say it." "A man the city is afraid of." "Afraid?" He smiled, and it was the coldest expression she'd ever seen. "They should be. I've earned every ounce of that fear." Adriana's hands trembled. She clasped them together to still them. "What do you want from me?" "I want you to understand something." Matteo set down his glass and crossed the room toward her. Adriana forced herself not to retreat. He stopped a foot away, close enough that she could smell his cologne, something dark and expensive. "This marriage is business. Your father owed a debt. I needed a wife to solidify my position with the old families. This is a transaction." "A transaction," Adriana repeated, the word bitter on her tongue. "Yes." His eyes were hard, unreadable. "I don't expect love. I don't expect devotion. But I do expect loyalty. I expect you to play your part in public. And I expect you not to embarrass me." "And in private?" Something flickered in his expression, too quick to read. "In private, we maintain appearances when necessary. You'll attend events with me. You'll be seen at my side. You'll be the perfect Mafia wife." "And in exchange?" "In exchange, you'll have everything you could want: money, security, protection, a life most women would kill for." "Everything except freedom." Matteo's jaw tightened. "Freedom is a luxury in this world. You gave that up the moment you walked down that aisle." The words hit like a physical blow. Adriana felt tears sting her eyes, but she refused to let them fall. She wouldn't give him that satisfaction. "I didn't choose this," she said quietly. "No," Matteo agreed. "You didn't, but neither did I. This is the life we were born into. The only difference is I've learned to thrive in it." He turned away, moving back to the bar. Adriana watched him pour another drink, her mind racing. This was her wedding night. She was trapped in a suite with a man who'd bought her like livestock, a man who ruled a criminal empire, a man who'd just told her she had no freedom left. She looked toward the doors. Locked. The windows, 3 stories up, overlooking grounds patrolled by armed men. But maybe... Matteo's phone buzzed. He pulled it from his pocket, glanced at the screen, and his expression darkened. "I have to take this." He moved to the far side of the room, his voice dropping to a low murmur in Italian. Adriana couldn't make out the words, but she heard the tone, cold, commanding, dangerous. This was her chance, maybe her only chance. She moved quickly, quietly, toward the doors. Her hands found the lock. It was one of those old-fashioned mechanisms, a heavy bolt that slid into place. She eased it back, wincing at every tiny sound. Behind her, Matteo was still on the phone, his back turned. Adriana opened the door 6 inches, 8, 12. Then she ran. The corridor was empty. Adriana kicked off her heels and sprinted down the hallway in bare feet, her wedding dress bunched in her hands. She had no plan, no destination, just the overwhelming need to escape. Behind her, she heard a door slam open. "Adriana!" Matteo's voice was a whip crack. She ran faster. The estate was a maze. Adriana flew down one corridor, then another, past closed doors and dark windows and paintings that seemed to watch her flee. Her breath came in gasps. The dress was too heavy, too long. She nearly tripped twice. A staircase. She took it, her feet slapping against marble. Down one floor, then another. She could hear footsteps behind her now, fast, purposeful, closing the distance. "Stop running!" She didn't stop, couldn't stop. The main floor. She recognized the ballroom, now empty and dark. Which way were the exits? Left. She veered left, down another corridor. A door. She tried it. Locked. Another door. Also locked. Every exit was sealed, secured. Of course they were. This wasn't a home. It was a fortress. The footsteps were closer now. Too close. Adriana burst through a door and found herself in a library. Floor-to-ceiling books, leather chairs, a fireplace cold and dark. No other exits. She'd trapped herself. She spun around just as Matteo filled the doorway. He'd lost his tie somewhere in the chase. His shirt was partially unbuttoned. His dark hair had fallen across his forehead. And his eyes, those black, unreadable eyes, burned with something between fury and something else she couldn't name. "Nowhere left to run," he said quietly. Adriana backed away until she hit the wall. "Stay away from me." Matteo crossed the room in 3 long strides. Adriana pressed herself against the wall, her heart hammering so hard she thought it might break through her ribs. He stopped inches away, one hand braced against the wall beside her head, caging her in. "Did you really think you could escape?" "I had to try." "Why?" His voice was dangerously soft. "Where would you go? Back to your father, the man who sold you?" "Anywhere but here." "There is no anywhere else, not anymore." His free hand came up, fingers wrapping around her jaw, forcing her to meet his eyes. "You're mine now, Adriana. The moment you said I do, your old life ended." "You can't own a person." His laugh was dark, humorless. "In my world, I can own anything I want." They were so close now that Adriana could feel the heat radiating from his body, could see the pulse beating in his throat, could smell the faint scent of whiskey on his breath. His grip on her jaw wasn't painful, but it was firm, unbreakable. "Let me go," she whispered. "No." "Please." Begging won't work. His thumb brushed across her lower lip, the touch almost gentle. Almost. "I could take everything from you right now. You're my wife, my property. I have every legal right." Terror flooded through her. "Don't." "But I'm not going to." His hand dropped away from her face, though he didn't step back. "Because unlike your father, I don't take what isn't freely given." Adriana stared at him, confusion cutting through fear. "What?" "I'm a lot of things, Adriana. A killer, a criminal, a monster, if you believe the stories." His eyes held hers, dark and intense. "But I'm not a rapist. I won't touch you like that. Not tonight. Not ever, unless you ask me to." She didn't know what to say. Didn't know if she could believe him. Matteo stepped back, giving her space. "But understand this. You don't get to run. You don't get to leave. You are my wife, and you will fulfill that role. In public, you will stand beside me. You will smile. You will be loyal. And if you ever try to run from me again..." He paused, his voice dropping to something deadly soft. "I will find you. I will bring you back, and I will make sure you understand exactly what it means to be a DeLuca." He turned and walked toward the door, his footsteps echoing in the silent library. Adriana's legs gave out. She slid down the wall until she was sitting on the floor, her wedding dress pooling around her like a white sea, her whole body trembling. At the doorway, Matteo paused without turning around. "Mrs. Castellano will show you to your room. Separate from mine. You'll have your own space, your own privacy." "Why?" Adriana's voice was barely a whisper. "Why not just force me?" He was silent for a long moment. When he spoke, his voice carried something she hadn't heard before, something that might have been weariness or regret. "Because I've spent my entire life taking orders from my father, becoming the man he needed me to be. The heir, the killer, the monster." He glanced back at her, his expression unreadable in the shadows. "I won't give you the same choice he never gave me. You'll obey me in public, but what happens in private, when and if it happens, that will be your decision." Then he was gone, leaving Adriana alone in the dark library, her mind reeling. She'd run. He'd caught her. He'd had every opportunity to break her, to take what he believed he'd bought, but he hadn't. And somehow, that restraint was more terrifying than any threat could have been. Mrs. Castellano arrived 10 minutes later, her face carefully neutral as she helped Adriana to her feet, and led her through the silent estate to a different wing entirely. The room she was shown to was beautiful, smaller than the master suite, but still luxurious. A four-poster bed, a sitting area, windows that overlook gardens bathed in moonlight. "Your things have been brought up," Mrs. Castellano said quietly. "If you need anything, press the button by the bed. Someone will come." "A guard or a servant?" Adriana asked bitterly. The older woman's expression didn't change. "Both, probably." She left, closing the door softly behind her. Adriana stood in the center of the room, still wearing her wedding dress, her feet aching, her mind a chaos of fear and confusion and something else she couldn't name. She moved to the window, pressing her palm against the cool glass. Beyond the manicured gardens, she could see the estate walls, high, imposing, topped with security cameras that gleamed in the darkness. She was a prisoner, a bride who'd been sold into captivity, but Matteo had let her run, had caught her, and then had walked away. "I won't touch you like that. Not tonight. Not ever, unless you ask me to." Why would a man like that, a man who ruled through fear and power, show restraint? What game was he playing? Adriana pressed her forehead against the window, exhaustion finally catching up with the adrenaline. She didn't understand him, didn't understand any of this. But one thing was clear, her old life was gone. Her freedom was gone. Everything she'd known had ended the moment she'd said, "I do." And whatever came next, whatever this twisted marriage became, it would be nothing like she'd imagined. Behind her, the lock on her door clicked softly into place. Not to keep people out, she realized, to keep her in. Adriana woke to sunlight streaming through unfamiliar windows and the sound of voices in the hallway beyond her door. For one blissful moment, she thought the wedding had been a nightmare. Then she saw the wedding dress draped over a chair, still pristine despite everything, and reality crashed back. She was married. She was a prisoner. She was Adriana DeLuca now. The thought made her sick. A knock at the door. "Mrs. DeLuca, breakfast is ready." Mrs. DeLuca. The name felt like a caller. "I'm not hungry," Adriana called out. "Mr. DeLuca requests your presence downstairs." Requests. As if she had a choice. Adriana forced herself out of bed and into the bathroom, all marble and gold fixtures that probably cost more than her childhood home. She showered, letting the hot water wash away the remnants of last night's fear, then dressed in clothes she found waiting in the closet. Simple things, jeans, a silk blouse, flats. Someone had unpacked her meager belongings while she slept. When she finally made her way downstairs, following the sound of voices, she found Matteo in a dining room that could seat 20, eating breakfast and reading something on his phone. He looked up when she entered. "Good morning." His voice was neutral, professional, as if last night hadn't happened, as if he hadn't chased her through the house and pinned her against a wall. "Is it?" Adriana sat down across from him, accepting coffee from a servant who appeared and disappeared like a ghost. Matteo's lips quirked, not quite a smile. "No, but we pretend anyway." For a moment, they sat in silence. Adriana studied him in the morning light. He wore a simple black shirt, sleeves rolled up to reveal strong forearms marked with scars. His dark hair was slightly damp, as if he'd recently showered. He looked normal, human, not like the monster from last night. "Why did you let me go?" The question escaped before she could stop it. Matteo set down his phone, his dark eyes meeting hers. "What? Last night, you could have—" She couldn't finish the sentence. "I told you why." "No, you told me you wouldn't force me. But you didn't have to give me my own room. You didn't have to give me space. Why did you?" He was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Then, "Because my father would have locked you in his room and broken you until you were too scared to even think about running." The casual way he said it made Adriana's blood run cold. "And I'm not my father," Matteo continued. "I do a lot of terrible things, Adriana. I've killed men, I've destroyed lives, I've built an empire on fear, but I won't become him, not in that way." It wasn't reassurance, it was just truth. Brutal and honest. "What happens now?" Adriana asked quietly. "Now? You learn what it means to be my wife." Matteo leaned back in his chair studying her. "You'll attend events with me, dinners, meetings. You'll smile and look happy and play the role you signed up for." I didn't sign up for anything. Your father did. You said I do. That's all the consent this world requires. He paused. But I'll make you a deal. Adriana's heart lurched. What kind of deal? Give me 6 months. 6 months of loyalty. Don't run. Don't fight me in public. Stand beside me when I need you to. In return, I'll give you freedom within these walls. Your own space. Your own life. As much as possible. And after 6 months? After 6 months, if you still want to leave, we'll discuss options. It was a lie. She knew it was a lie. Men like Matteo De Luca didn't let people go, but it was also the only offer she was going to get. 6 months, Adriana repeated, and you won't force anything? I already told you, I won't touch you unless you ask. His voice was firm. That's not negotiable. She wanted to believe him, wanted to trust that moment of restraint she'd seen last night, but trust was a luxury she couldn't afford. Still, 6 months. 6 months to figure out how to survive this, how to find a way out. Okay, she said finally. 6 months. Matteo nodded once as if sealing a contract. Then, welcome to your new life, Mrs. De Luca. He stood, buttoning his jacket, back to business. I have meetings today. Marco will stay with you. Marco? Your bodyguard. I don't need a bodyguard. Matteo's smile was cold. You're a De Luca now. You absolutely need a bodyguard. The enemies I've made would love nothing more than to hurt me through you. The implication sent ice down her spine. She wasn't just a prisoner. She was a target. Matteo moved toward the door, then paused. One more thing. Tonight, we're having dinner with the Antonelli family. Vincent Antonelli is an old rival. This dinner is delicate, and you want me there. I need you there, looking happy, looking loyal. His eyes held hers. Can you do that? Adriana thought about running again, about fighting, about refusing. Then she thought about the walls, the guards, the locked doors, about the fact that she had nowhere to go and no one to help her. Yes, she said quietly. I can do that. Good. Matteo's expression didn't change, but something flickered in his eyes. Approval, maybe, or calculation. Mrs. Castellano will help you prepare. Wear something elegant. We leave at 7. Then he was gone, leaving Adriana alone in the vast dining room with cold coffee and the crushing weight of her new reality. She was married to a monster. She was a prisoner in a gilded cage. And tonight, she would have to smile and pretend everything was fine while sitting across from her husband's enemies. This was her life now. And somehow, she had to find a way to survive it. The black dress Mrs. Castellano laid out on Adriana's bed looked like it cost more than a year's rent. Silk that caught the light like oil on water. A neckline that was modest but elegant. A hem that fell just below the knee. Tasteful. Expensive. The uniform of a Mafia wife. Adriana stared at it with something close to hatred. Mr. De Luca wants you ready by 6:30, Mrs. Castellano said, smoothing invisible wrinkles from the fabric. That gives you 2 hours. 2 hours to get dressed? 2 hours to look like you belong at his side. The older woman's tone wasn't unkind, but it wasn't gentle either. Hair, makeup, the right jewelry. In this world, appearances are armor. Adriana wanted to argue, wanted to refuse, but she'd made a deal, 6 months of playing the role in exchange for whatever freedom Matteo was willing to give her. And she meant to survive those 6 months, which meant picking her battles carefully. Fine, she said. What do I need to do? Mrs. Castellano's expression softened almost imperceptibly. First, stop looking like you're walking to your execution. The Antonellis are sharks. They'll smell fear. 2 women arrived to help, one for hair, one for makeup. They worked in efficient silence, transforming Adriana from a girl who'd spent the morning trying not to cry into something that looked like it belonged in Matteo's world. Her dark hair was swept into an elegant twist. Her makeup was subtle but flawless. Smoky eyes, nude lips, a dusting of highlighter that made her cheekbones sharp enough to cut. When they were done, Adriana barely recognized herself in the mirror. Jewelry, Mrs. Castellano said, producing a velvet box. Inside was a diamond necklace that probably cost more than Adriana's father's house. From Mr. De Luca. He wants you to wear it tonight. The stones were cold against Adriana's skin as Mrs. Castellano fastened the clasp. Another chain, another reminder of who owned her now. At 6:20, there was a knock at her door. Mateo stood in the hallway, dressed in a charcoal suit that fit him like it had been tailored to his body, which it probably had. His dark hair was swept back, his expression unreadable. For a moment, he just looked at her, his eyes traveling from her face down to the diamonds at her throat and back up again. "You look perfect," he said finally. It didn't sound like a compliment. It sounded like an assessment. "Thank you," Adriana replied, keeping her voice neutral. Mateo offered his arm. After a moment's hesitation, she took it. His forearm was solid beneath her fingers, warm through the expensive fabric of his suit. They walked through the estate in silence, down corridors Adriana was still learning to navigate, past guards who nodded respectfully as they passed. Outside, a black town car waited, gleaming in the early evening light. Marco, the bodyguard Mateo had mentioned that morning, stood beside it. He was a mountain of a man, easily 6'4", with the build of someone who could break bones without breaking a sweat, but his eyes were sharp, intelligent, constantly scanning their surroundings. "Mrs. DeLuca," he said with a slight nod. The name still felt foreign. Wrong. Mateo held the car door open for her. Adriana slid into the leather interior, the scent of expensive cologne and gun oil filling her senses. Mateo settled beside her, close enough that their legs almost touched. "Tell me about the Antonellis," Adriana said as the car pulled through the estate gates. Mateo glanced at her, something like approval flickering across his features. "Smart. Always know who you're dealing with. I'm assuming they're not friends." "Nobody in this business has friends. We have allies, enemies, and people we tolerate because killing them would be too expensive." But he shifted slightly, his shoulder brushing hers. "Vincent Antonelli runs most of the gambling operations on the north side. His family and mine have been rivals for 3 generations. Then why are we having dinner with them?" "Because last month one of Vincent's warehouses burned down. He thinks I'm responsible. I'm not, but convincing him of that requires a show of good faith." Adriana's stomach tightened. "And I'm part of that show. You're my wife, which means you represent stability, legitimacy. The old families value that." Mateo's voice was matter-of-fact, as if he were discussing a business transaction, which, she supposed, he was. "Vincent will try to rattle you. He'll ask personal questions. He'll make inappropriate comments. His wife, Claudia, will smile and judge everything about you." "And what am I supposed to do?" "Smile. Be polite. Don't react to anything they say." His eyes met hers, hard and intense. "And most importantly, make them believe we're a real couple. Make them believe you're loyal to me." "We are a real couple," Adriana said bitterly. "We're legally married." "Legal and real are 2 very different things." Mateo's hand moved to cover hers where it rested on the seat between them. His palm was warm, his grip firm. "Tonight, we need to look like more than a business arrangement. Can you do that?" Adriana stared at their joined hands. His fingers were long, elegant, marked with scars she didn't want to think about the origins of. "What exactly does that mean?" "It means you let me touch you. Not intimately, but familiarly. The way a husband touches his wife." He paused. "I won't do anything you're not comfortable with, but I need you to not flinch when I put my hand on your back. I need you to lean into me when we're standing together. Small things that tell the world we're united." Every instinct screamed at her to refuse, but she'd agreed to 6 months. 6 months of playing this role. "Okay," she said quietly. "I can do that." Mateo's thumb brushed across her knuckles, the same gesture he'd made when he'd put the wedding ring on her finger. "Good, because if they sense weakness, they'll exploit it, and I can't protect you if you give them ammunition." The restaurant was in the heart of the city, tucked away behind an unmarked door that opened into a world of white tablecloths and crystal chandeliers, the kind of place where reservations were impossible to get unless your last name came with a body count. Vincent Antonelli was already seated when they arrived, a broad-shouldered man in his 50s with silver hair and eyes like flint. Beside him sat a woman who had to be Claudia, dressed in burgundy silk with diamonds that rivaled Adriana's own. "Mateo," Vincent said, rising to shake hands. His grip looked like it could crush bones. And this must be the new bride I've heard so much about. Adriana, Matteo said, his hand settling possessively on the small of her back. My wife. Adriana, this is Vincent and Claudia Antonelli. Charming, Vincent said, though his eyes were calculating as they swept over her. Tell me, my dear, how does a girl like you end up married to a man like Matteo? The question was a trap. Adriana could feel it. She smiled, the expression she'd been practicing all afternoon. I'd say I'm lucky. Not everyone gets to marry someone who values loyalty as much as Matteo does. Vincent's eyebrows rose slightly. Beside him, Claudia's lips curved into something that might have been amusement or approval. Loyalty, Vincent repeated. Yes, that is valuable in our world, provided it runs both ways. They sat. A waiter appeared with wine, something red and probably older than Adriana. Matteo's hand remained on her back as he helped her into her chair. The touch warmed through the thin silk of her dress. So, Claudia said, her voice honeyed and sharp. How long have you two known each other? The engagement was quite sudden, wasn't it? Another trap. Adriana glanced at Matteo, who gave her the slightest nod. Permission to answer. Sometimes you just know, Adriana said, reaching for her wine glass. When it's right, there's no point in waiting. How romantic. Claudia's smile didn't reach her eyes. And your family? I don't recall hearing the name Vale before. My family isn't in the business, Adriana replied carefully. My father is in finance. Finance? Vincent chuckled. That's one way to describe gambling debts. The words hit like a slap. Adriana felt her face flush, felt humiliation burn through her. So they knew. Of course they knew. Her father's debts, the transaction that had bought and sold her like livestock, it was probably the talk of every family in the city. Matteo's hand moved from her back to her thigh under the table, squeezing gently, a warning or a comfort, she couldn't tell which. Adriana's family history is irrelevant, Matteo said, his voice pleasant but edged with steel. She's a DeLuca now, which means she's under my protection. And anyone who disrespects her disrespects me. The temperature in the room seemed to drop 10 degrees. Vincent raised his hands in mock surrender. No disrespect intended, my friend. Merely making conversation. Of course. Matteo's smile was all teeth, no warmth. Now, shall we discuss why we're really here? Your warehouse, the fire. Yes, let's. Vincent leaned back in his chair, his expression hardening. $3 million in merchandise. Gone. And a week later I hear rumors that DeLuca shipments are being rerouted through the north side. Rumors, Matteo said flatly. Started by someone who wants us at each other's throats. You're saying you had nothing to do with it? I'm saying if I wanted to destroy your operation, you'd already be dead. The casual way Matteo delivered the threat made Adriana's blood run cold. But I don't. Your territory is yours. Mine is mine. I have no interest in a war that would cost us both more than we'd gain. Vincent studied him for a long moment. Then who did burn down my warehouse? I don't know. But I intend to find out. Matteo's hand tightened slightly on Adriana's thigh. Not painfully, but firmly. A reminder that she was part of this, whether she wanted to be or not. Someone is trying to destabilize the families. Turn us against each other. I suggest we find out who before they succeed. And I'm supposed to just trust you? No. You're supposed to use your brain. Matteo's voice was sharp now, cutting. We've avoided open conflict for 5 years. Our fathers tried to kill each other for 2 decades before that. Do you really want to go back to that? Because I don't. Claudia cleared her throat delicately. Perhaps the men should discuss business, and we should discuss more pleasant topics. Adriana, dear, tell me, how are you finding married life? It was a dismissal, a subtle reminder that women in this world were decorative, not decision makers. Adriana felt anger flare, but she swallowed it down. It's an adjustment, she said carefully, but Matteo has been patient. Patient, Claudia's smile was knowing. How unusual. The DeLuca men are not typically known for their patience. Maybe I'm a good influence, Adriana replied, surprising herself with the edge in her voice. Claudia laughed. A genuine sound. Oh, I like her, Matteo. She has fire. You'll need that. Married to this one. The dinner continued. Courses of food Adriana barely tasted, wine that went down like water, conversation that danced around threats and alliances, and the brutal calculus of power. Matteo kept his hand on her throughout, sometimes on her thigh, sometimes playing with her fingers, always maintaining the illusion of intimacy. And slowly, Adriana found herself falling into the role, leaning into his shoulder when he made a point, laughing at something Vincent said even though it wasn't funny, playing the devoted wife so convincingly that she almost forgot it was an act. Almost. "You're doing well," Matteo murmured at one point, his lips close to her ear. To anyone watching, it would look like a whispered endearment. "Keep it up." By the time dessert arrived, Vincent seemed marginally less hostile. "Perhaps you're right," he said, swirling brandy in his glass. "Perhaps someone is playing us against each other." "I'll look into it," Matteo promised, "and I'll share what I find. We don't have to be friends, Vincent, but we don't have to be enemies either." "Agreed." Vincent raised his glass. "To temporary peace." "To peace," Matteo echoed, touching his glass to Vincent's. They left an hour later, stepping out into the cool night air. Marco was waiting by the car, ever vigilant. Matteo's hand remained on Adriana's back as he guided her toward the vehicle. "You did well tonight," he said once they were inside, the privacy partition up between them and the driver. "I smiled and played my part," Adriana replied, exhaustion suddenly crashing over her. "Just like you asked. It was more than that. You were smart, quick. You didn't let Vincent rattle you." He paused. "That comment about your father was true." Adriana stared out the window at the city lights blurring past. "Everything they said was true. I was sold to clear gambling debts. My marriage is a business transaction. I'm property that changed hands." "Adriana, don't." She turned to face him, suddenly furious. "Don't try to make it sound like something it's not. You said it yourself this morning. This is business. I'm playing a role. That's all this is." Matteo was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable in the shadows of the car. Then, "You're right. It is business. But you handled yourself like someone who was born to this world. That takes strength. Or desperation. Sometimes they're the same thing." He reached into his jacket, pulling out something small. "Here. You earned this." It was a phone. Sleek, expensive, already powered on. Adriana stared at it. "What is this?" "A phone. You can call anyone you want." "Well, almost anyone." He gave her a wry smile. "It's monitored, obviously, and there are restrictions on certain numbers, but it's yours. A small piece of freedom." She took it carefully, as if it might be a trick. "Why?" "Because you kept your word tonight. You were loyal, in public, when it mattered. That deserves something in return." His eyes met hers. "I'm not a complete monster, Adriana. When you do what I need, I can be generous." It was such a small thing, a phone. But after days of isolation, of being cut off from everyone and everything she'd known, it felt like a lifeline. "Thank you," she said quietly. The rest of the drive passed in silence. When they arrived back at the estate, Matteo walked her to her room, a courtesy that felt more like supervision. "Get some rest," he said at her door. "Tomorrow will be easier." "Will it?" Something flickered in his expression. Regret, maybe, or weariness. "Probably not. But we lie to ourselves to survive." He turned to leave, then paused. "Adriana, what you said at dinner about me being patient, did you mean it?" She thought about the wedding night, about how he'd caught her, trapped her, had every opportunity to force her, and hadn't, about the separate room, the space, the small freedoms he'd allowed. "Yes," she said finally. "You've been patient. I don't understand why, but yes." Matteo nodded slowly. "Maybe someday I'll tell you." Then he was gone, leaving Adriana alone with a phone she couldn't really use and questions she didn't have answers to. She locked her door, a useless gesture given that Matteo probably had keys to every room in the estate, and collapsed onto her bed, still wearing the black dress and the diamonds that marked her as his. The phone felt heavy in her hands. She wanted to call someone, anyone. But who? Her father, who'd sold her? Her few friends, who couldn't help her? The police, who were probably on Matteo's payroll? There was no one. She was alone in a gilded cage, married to a man she barely knew, playing a role she'd never auditioned for. But she'd survived tonight. That had to count for something. The next morning, Adriana woke to raised voices somewhere in the house. She pulled on a robe and opened her door carefully, listening. "Don't care what he wants," Matteo's voice, sharp with anger. "Sir, he's insisting—" Another man's voice, strained. "Then insist harder." Footsteps. Adriana barely had time to step back before Matteo appeared in the hallway, his face dark with fury. He stopped when he saw her. "Get dressed," he said curtly. "We're going out." "Where?" "My father wants to meet you." The word sent ice down Adriana's spine. Matteo's father, the man he'd compared himself to last night, the man whose cruelty he'd promised not to emulate. "Now?" she asked. "Now." Matteo's jaw was tight. "He's at the estate. I can't refuse him." Adriana dressed quickly, her hands shaking slightly as she pulled on jeans and a simple sweater. This felt different than the dinner with the Antonellis. That had been performance. This felt like judgment. Matteo was waiting in the hallway when she emerged, his expression still stormy. "A few things you need to know," he said as they walked. "My father is difficult. He'll test you, insult you, try to make you cry. Don't give him the satisfaction." "What does he want?" "To make sure I didn't marry someone weak." Matteo's voice was flat, emotionless. "To assert his authority, to remind me that he's still the head of this family, even if I run the day-to-day operations." They descended to the ground floor, heading toward a wing of the house Adriana hadn't explored yet. Guards stood at intervals. More than usual, she noticed. All of them looked tense. The room Matteo led her to was a study, all dark wood and leather, reeking of cigar smoke and old money. And behind a massive desk sat a man who looked like an older, harder version of Matteo. Salvatore De Luca was in his 70s, but didn't look it. His hair was steel gray, his eyes the same dark brown as his son's, but colder, crueler. He wore an expensive suit and an expression that suggested he found the entire world disappointing. "So," he said, his voice gravelly from decades of cigars, "this is the girl you married." "Father," Matteo said, his tone carefully neutral, "this is Adriana, my wife." Salvatore's eyes raked over her like she was livestock being appraised. "She's pretty enough, I suppose. Is she fertile?" The question was so blunt, so invasive, that Adriana felt her face flush with humiliation. "That's none of your concern," Matteo said, his voice tight. "Everything about this family is my concern, boy. I built this empire. I decide who's worthy of the De Luca name." Salvatore leaned back in his chair. "Tell me, girl, why did you marry my son?" Adriana's mind raced. Every answer felt like a trap. "Because he asked," she said finally. "Because he asked," Salvatore repeated mockingly. "Or because your degenerate father owed us $200,000 and saw an opportunity to clear his debts by selling his daughter?" The number hit like a physical blow. 200,000. That's what she'd been worth. "That's enough," Matteo said sharply. "Is it?" Salvatore's smile was cruel. "I'm simply establishing facts. This girl came from nothing. Her family has no power, no connections, no value. And you married her anyway. Why?" "Because I needed a wife. The old families were questioning my legitimacy. A marriage solved that problem." "A marriage to someone worthy would have solved that problem," Salvatore countered. "A marriage to the Caruso girl, or the Marino girl, families with history, with power. Instead, you chose this." He waved dismissively at Adriana. "This nobody." Adriana felt anger override fear. "If I'm such a nobody, why are you here?" The room went silent. Salvatore's eyebrows rose. Beside her, Adriana felt Matteo tense. "Excuse me," Salvatore said, his voice deadly soft. "You came here to meet me, to test me." Adriana forced herself to meet his gaze, even though every instinct screamed at her to look away. "If I was really worthless, you wouldn't bother. So either I matter or you're wasting your time. Which is it?" For a long, terrible moment, Salvatore just stared at her. Then, incredibly, he laughed. "She has spine," he said to Matteo. I'll give you that. Most girls would be crying by now. Oh, most girls aren't stupid enough to talk back to you, Matteo muttered. Salvatore stood, moving around the desk with the careful grace of a predator. He stopped in front of Adriana, close enough that she could smell expensive cologne and cigar smoke. You think you're clever, he said quietly. But let me tell you something, girl. This world will chew you up and spit you out. My son may have given you a ring, but that doesn't make you family. That doesn't make you safe. Every enemy he has will come for you eventually, and when they do, that spine of yours won't be enough to save you. Then maybe, Adriana said, her voice steadier than she felt, you should have raised a son who makes fewer enemies. The slap came so fast she didn't see it coming. One moment she was standing, the next her head snapped to the side, pain exploding across her cheek. Father! Matteo's voice was a whip crack. He stepped between them, his body a wall protecting Adriana. That's enough. I'll decide when it's enough, Salvatore snarled. That girl just disrespected me in my own house. This is my house, Matteo said, his voice dangerously quiet. You retired, remember? You handed control to me, which means what happens under this roof is my decision, and I'm deciding this meeting is over. Father and son stared at each other, the tension between them sharp enough to cut. Adriana pressed her hand to her burning cheek, tasting blood where she'd bitten her lip. Finally, Salvatore stepped back. You're making a mistake protecting her. She'll be your weakness. Or my strength. We'll see. Matteo's hand found Adriana's, pulling her toward the door. Goodbye, Father. They left quickly, Matteo practically dragging Adriana down the hallway. She could feel his fury radiating off him in waves. I'm sorry, she said when they were safely away. I shouldn't have... Don't apologize. Matteo stopped, turning to face her. His eyes swept over her face, landing on the red mark that was probably already bruising. Are you all right? I've been hit harder. It was a lie, but his expression softened slightly anyway. He reached out, his fingers gentle as they touched her cheek. He had no right. He's your father. He's a bully who thinks fear equals respect. Matteo's jaw tightened. I'm nothing like him. I know, Adriana said. And strangely, she meant it. They stood there in the hallway, Matteo's hand still cupping her injured cheek, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body. For just a moment, the air between them felt charged with something that wasn't anger or fear. Then Matteo stepped back, his hand falling away. Come on, let's get some ice on that. He led her to the kitchen, a massive professional space that probably saw more staff than family. Matteo dismissed the cook with a gesture and pulled ice from the freezer himself, wrapping it in a clean towel. Here. He pressed it gently against her cheek. Hold that. Adriana took the makeshift ice pack, wincing at the cold. Your father really hates me. My father hates everyone. It's not personal. Matteo leaned against the counter, running a hand through his hair. I'm sorry. I should have warned you better. Should have prepared you. For being slapped? For him. Matteo's expression was bleak. He built this empire on fear and violence, and he can't understand why I'd choose to do things differently. Do you? Do things differently? Matteo was quiet for a long moment. I try. I'm still a killer, Adriana. I've done terrible things, but I don't enjoy it the way he does. I don't want to become him. The vulnerability in his voice surprised her. This wasn't the cold, calculating crime lord from the wedding night. This was someone trapped by legacy, trying to be better than the man who raised him. You stood up for me, Adriana said quietly. Against your own father. Why? Because you're my wife, and in this world that means something. His eyes met hers. I may not love you, Adriana, but I will protect you. That's the deal. It should have felt cold, transactional, but somehow, in that moment, it felt like the most honest thing anyone had said to her in weeks. Thank you, she said. Matteo nodded once, then straightened. Keep the ice on for 20 minutes. Mrs. Castellano will bring you something for the pain. He started to leave, then paused at the door. And Adriana? What you did in there, standing up to him. That was either incredibly brave or incredibly stupid. Which do you think it was? A ghost of a smile crossed his face. Both. Definitely both. Then he was gone, leaving Adriana alone in the kitchen with a bruised cheek and the strange, unsettling realization that she was starting to understand her husband. And maybe, just maybe, he was starting to understand her too. The bruise on Adriana's cheek had faded to a sickly yellow by the time Matteo summoned her 3 days later. She'd spent those days exploring the estate grounds under Marco's watchful eye, learning the rhythms of this new prison. The gardens were beautiful, but monitored by cameras. The library was extensive, but every book felt like it had been chosen to impress rather than read. Even her phone, that small gift of freedom, felt more like a leash than a lifeline when she noticed how carefully her messages were being screened. Mrs. Castellano found her in the morning room, staring out at rain-soaked gardens. "Mr. De Luca needs you in his office." Adriana's stomach tightened. "What for?" He didn't say. The older woman's expression was carefully neutral. "But you should come now." Matteo's office was on the second floor, in a wing she'd been told was off-limits. The door stood open. Inside, Matteo sat behind a desk covered in papers and laptop screens, looking every inch the corporate executive except for the gun resting casually beside his keyboard. He glanced up when she entered. "Close the door." She did, her pulse quickening. This felt different than their previous encounters. More urgent, more dangerous. "We have a problem," Matteo said without preamble. Vincent Antonelli's warehouse wasn't the only one hit. 2 more burned down last night. One of mine, one belonging to the Caruso family. "I don't understand. What does that have to do with me?" "It means someone is trying to start a war between the families, and they're succeeding." He stood, moving around the desk with that predatory grace she was beginning to recognize. "There's a meeting tonight. All the heads of the major families. It's going to get ugly." "And you want me there?" "No." His answer surprised her. "I want you as far away from this as possible, but that's not an option anymore." "Why not?" Matteo pulled something from his pocket, a photograph. He laid it on the desk in front of her. Adriana's blood ran cold. It was her, walking through the estate gardens with Marco, taken from outside the walls with a telephoto lens. "This was delivered to me this morning," Matteo said quietly, along with a message. "The new bride looks fragile. It would be a shame if something happened to her." Adriana's hands trembled as she picked up the photo. "Who sent it?" "I don't know yet, but whoever it is, they're making it clear that you're a target." His jaw tightened. "Which means I can't leave you here alone while I attend the meeting. You're coming with me." "To a meeting with crime bosses who all want to kill each other?" "To a meeting where your presence reminds everyone that attacking you means declaring war on me." Matteo's eyes were hard, calculating. "You wanted to know what it means to be a De Luca? This is it. You're not just my wife anymore. You're a piece on the board, a weapon I can use to keep the peace, or a weakness my enemies can exploit." The brutal honesty of it stole her breath. "And if they decide I'm not worth the trouble of keeping me alive, then I kill anyone who touches you." He said it so matter-of-factly, like he was discussing the weather. "But it won't come to that. Not if we play this right. We." The word tasted strange, like they were actually partners instead of captor and prisoner. "Yes, we." Matteo moved closer, his expression softening slightly. "I know you didn't choose this, Adriana. I know every day here feels like a cage. But right now, we need each other. I need you to help me maintain the fragile peace that's keeping this city from tearing itself apart. And you need me to keep you alive long enough to see those 6 months through." She wanted to argue, wanted to throw the photograph back in his face and demand to know why she should care about his wars and his enemies. But the fear in the pit of her stomach was real. Someone had taken her picture. Someone was watching. Someone wanted to hurt her to get to him. "What do I need to do?" she asked quietly. Relief flickered across his features. "The same thing you did with the Antonellis. Stand beside me. Look loyal. Don't show fear." He paused. "But there's one more thing. These men, they'll be looking for any sign of weakness, any crack in our united front, which means we need to look like more than a business arrangement." "How much more?" "Like a real marriage." His hand came up to cup her unbruised cheek, the touch surprisingly gentle. "Like we chose this. Like we want each other." Adriana's breath caught. "You want me to pretend I'm in love with you?" I want you to pretend you're not afraid of me. The rest will follow. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. Can you do that? She thought about the wedding night, about his restraint, about how he'd defended her against his own father, about the small freedoms he'd given her when he could have given her nothing at all. Yes, she said. I can do that. Good. Mateo's hand dropped away. We leave in 2 hours. Wear something that says you belong at my side. And Adriana? His eyes met hers. Whatever happens tonight, don't leave my sight, not for a second. The venue was a private club in the old part of the city, the kind of place where men had been making deals and breaking bones for 100 years. Adriana felt the weight of eyes on her the moment she stepped through the door, Mateo's hand warm and possessive on her back. The room was filled with men in expensive suits and women dripping in jewelry that could probably fund small countries. Every conversation stopped as they entered. Every gaze tracked their movement across the floor. Mateo, a voice called out. A man in his 60s approached, his smile not reaching his eyes. And this must be the famous bride. Adriana, this is Carlo Marino, Mateo said. His family controls the ports. Charming. Carlo took her hand, his lips brushing her knuckles in a gesture that felt more like a threat than courtesy. Tell me, my dear, are you enjoying married life? Very much, Adriana replied, injecting warmth into her voice. Mateo has been wonderful. Has he? Carlo's eyebrows rose. How unusual. The De Luca men are typically known for their intensity. I like intensity, Adriana said, surprising herself. She felt Mateo's hand tighten on her back. Approval or warning, she couldn't tell. Carlo laughed. Oh, she's perfect for you, Mateo. Congratulations. More introductions followed, more appraising looks and thinly veiled threats disguised as pleasantries. Adriana smiled until her face hurt, leaning into Mateo when he pulled her close, playing the role of devoted wife with a conviction that surprised her. You're doing well, Mateo murmured at one point, his lips close to her ear. To anyone watching, it would look like an intimate moment between newlyweds. I'm terrified, she admitted quietly. Good. Fear keeps you sharp. His hand slid around her waist, drawing her closer. Just stay close to me. The meeting was called to order in a back room lined with leather chairs and dark wood paneling. Adriana counted 12 men, the heads of the major families, and their wives or escorts. She was the youngest woman there by at least a decade. Vincent Antonelli stood at the head of the table. We all know why we're here. Someone is burning our warehouses, destroying our property, trying to turn us against each other. The question is, who? And why should we believe it isn't you, Mateo? This from a thin man with sharp features, Enzo Caruso, if Adriana remembered correctly. Because I lost a warehouse too, Mateo replied evenly, and because starting a war makes no sense for me. I have the most to lose. Or the most to gain, Enzo countered. With us fighting each other, you could consolidate power. I already have power. Mateo's voice was cold. What I need is stability, peace, the kind of peace that lets us all make money without constantly watching our backs. Peace, Vincent scoffed. Since when does a De Luca want peace? Since I'm not my father. The words hung in the air, sharp and defiant. I'm not interested in the old ways, the constant violence, the never-ending feuds. I want to build something that lasts. How touching, someone muttered. Mateo's hand found Adriana's under the table, squeezing gently. She squeezed back, offering support she wasn't sure he deserved, but giving it anyway. Mateo's right, Carlo said reluctantly. A war benefits no one. We need to find out who's behind this before we start killing each other. And how do you propose we do that? Enzo demanded. We share information. We work together. Mateo's grip on Adriana's hand tightened. We set aside old grudges long enough to identify the real enemy. That's easy for you to say, Vincent said. You've got nothing to lose. But some of us have been hit harder than others. Then pool your resources, Mateo shot back. Use your combined networks to find out who's targeting us, or sit here arguing while your businesses burn to the ground. Your choice. The room erupted in overlapping voices, accusations flying like bullets. Adriana felt Mateo tense beside her, his body coiled like a spring ready to snap. Then a sound cut through the chaos, glass shattering. Everyone froze. Smoke began pouring through the broken windows. "It's a hit," someone shouted. Matteo was on his feet instantly, pulling Adriana with him. "Stay behind me!" Gunfire erupted. The room descended into chaos as men drew weapons and women screamed. Matteo shoved Adriana behind an overturned table, his body covering hers as bullets tore through the air above them. "Stay down," he ordered, his gun already in his hand. Adriana's heart hammered against her ribs. This was real. This was happening. People were dying 10 feet away, and she was trapped in the middle of it. Matteo returned fire, his movements precise and controlled. Marco appeared from somewhere, laying down covering fire. "Boss, we need to move." "Not without the others," Matteo said. "We leave together, or we don't leave at all." "They're trying to kill us," Adriana shouted over the gunfire. "They're trying to make us kill each other." Matteo grabbed Vincent, who was pinned down across the room. "Come on!" Together, they fought their way toward the exit. Adriana stayed low, her dress torn and her hands shaking, following Matteo's every command. She saw men fall, saw blood spray across expensive wallpaper, saw the brutal reality of the world she'd married into laid bare in violence and death. They burst out into an alley, gasping for air. Behind them, the building was engulfed in smoke and gunfire. "Everyone accounted for?" Matteo demanded. "2 dead," Marco reported grimly. Enzo Caruso and his wife. Silence fell over the survivors. Vincent's face was ashen. Carlo looked like he might be sick. "This was a setup," Matteo said, his voice shaking with barely controlled fury. "Someone knew we'd all be here. Someone wanted us dead or at each other's throats." "Or both," Vincent said quietly. Adriana felt Matteo's hand on her shoulder, checking her for injuries. "Are you hurt?" She shook her head, unable to speak past the terror clogging her throat. "Good." He turned to the others. "We need to get off the street. My safe house is 10 minutes from here. We can regroup there." "Why should we trust you?" someone demanded. "Because I just saved your life." Matteo's patience snapped. "Because whoever did this wants us dead or divided, and I refuse to give them the satisfaction. Now get in the cars or stay here and wait for round 2. Your choice." They chose the cars. The safe house was in an industrial district, hidden behind chain-link fences and graffiti-covered walls. Inside it was Spartan but secure. Reinforced doors, weapons lockers, enough supplies to withstand a siege. Adriana collapsed onto a couch, her whole body shaking. Around her, the surviving family heads argued in rapid Italian, their voices rising and falling like a violent tide. Matteo appeared with a bottle of water. "Drink." She took it with trembling hands. "People died tonight." "Yes." "You could have died." "Yes." He sat beside her close enough that their legs touched. "But we didn't. We survived." "This time," Adriana turned to face him. "This is your world. This is what you do. Kill or be killed." "Usually, yes." His expression was bleak. "Tonight was supposed to be different. Tonight was supposed to be about preventing exactly this kind of bloodshed. But it didn't work." "No, it didn't." Matteo ran a hand through his hair, and for the first time Adriana saw exhaustion in his eyes. "Someone is playing a game I don't understand yet, and until I figure out the rules, we're all in danger." Across the room, Vincent approached. "Matteo, a word." Matteo stood, but his hand found Adriana's shoulder. "Stay here. Don't go anywhere." She watched him move away, watched the huddle of men discussing death and strategy in equal measure. This was her life now. Not just playing dress-up at fancy dinners, not just smiling for cameras. This, violence and fear and the constant threat of death. She thought about running again, about finding a way out of this nightmare. But then she remembered the photograph, the threat, the knowledge that whoever was behind tonight's attack already knew who she was and where to find her. She was trapped, not just by Matteo or by her marriage, but by enemies she couldn't even name, Mrs. Castellano appeared from somewhere, bringing coffee and blankets. "Are you all right, dear?" "No," Adriana said honestly, "but I'm alive." "That's more than some can say tonight." The older woman's expression was grim. "This is the world you've married into. It doesn't get easier. You just get harder." The meeting reconvened an hour later. Mateo stood at the head of the group, his presence commanding despite the blood on his shirt and the exhaustion in his eyes. "We know 3 things," he said. "Someone knew about tonight's meeting, someone wanted us dead or fighting each other, and someone has resources we haven't identified yet." "Which means we have a traitor," Carlos said heavily. "Or several." Mateo's gaze swept the room. "From this point forward, we trust no one outside this room. We share information only with each other, and we find whoever is behind this before they strike again." "And if we can't," Vincent asked, "then we're all dead." Mateo's voice was flat. "But I don't plan on dying, and I don't plan on letting them win." He outlined a strategy: surveillance, information sharing, coordinated security. The men listened, some reluctantly, some with grudging respect. By the time the meeting ended, they had something resembling a plan. Adriana watched it all in exhausted silence. She saw how Mateo commanded the room, how he turned enemies into reluctant allies through sheer force of will. She saw the respect in their eyes, even from men who hated him. This was who he was, not the man who gave her a separate bedroom or a phone or small freedoms. This was Mateo De Luca in his element, a leader, a strategist, a killer when necessary. And somehow she was tied to him now, for better or worse. They left the safe house at dawn, exhaustion weighing heavy on everyone. Mateo kept Adriana close, his hand never leaving her back or her hand or her arm, not possessive now, protective. "I'm sorry," he said once they were alone in the car. "You shouldn't have had to see that." "It's your world," Adriana replied, staring out the window at the city waking up, oblivious to the violence that had unfolded hours before. "You told me I needed to understand it." "Understanding and experiencing are different things." "Yes, they are." She turned to face him. "Mateo, who do you think is behind this?" He was quiet for a long moment. "I don't know. Someone with reach. Someone with resources. Someone who understands our world well enough to manipulate it. Someone from inside." "Maybe." His jaw tightened. "That's what scares me most." They rode the rest of the way in silence. When they arrived at the estate, Mateo walked her to her room. "Get some rest," he said. "You've earned it." "So have you." He smiled, but it didn't reach his eyes. "I'll rest when this is over." Adriana hesitated, her hand on the door. "Mateo, tonight when the shooting started, you covered me. You could have run. You could have saved yourself, but you didn't. You're my wife. My responsibility. Is that all I am?" The question hung between them, heavy with implications neither seemed ready to address. "I don't know," Mateo said finally, honestly. "A month ago you were a transaction, a means to an end. But tonight, when those bullets were flying, all I could think about was getting you out alive. So no, maybe you're not just a responsibility anymore. Then what am I?" He reached out, his fingers brushing her cheek in a gesture that was becoming familiar. "Someone I don't want to lose." Then he was gone, leaving Adriana alone with a racing heart and the terrifying realization that somewhere between the forced marriage and the violence and the fear, something had shifted between them. She no longer knew if she was playing a role or if the role was becoming real. The next 2 weeks passed in a haze of heightened security and constant tension. Mateo increased the guards around the estate. Marco became Adriana's shadow, following her everywhere. Every car was checked for bombs. Every meal was tested for poison. The estate transformed from a prison into a fortress. And through it all, Mateo and Adriana found themselves spending more time together, not by choice, but by necessity. He couldn't leave her alone and unprotected. She couldn't go anywhere without him knowing. They ate breakfast together, discussed the day's plans. He taught her about the families, the history, the complex web of alliances and enmities that governed their world. She learned to read the subtle cues, who was loyal, who was opportunistic, who was dangerous. "Why are you telling me all this?" she asked one evening as they sat in his office, surrounded by files and photographs and intelligence reports. "Because if something happens to me, you need to know who to trust." Mateo didn't look up from the document he was reading. "And who to run from?" The casual acknowledgement of his possible death sent a chill through her. "Nothing's going to happen to you." "You don't know that." He finally met her gaze. "This is the reality, Adriana. I've made a lot of enemies. Any one of them could get lucky. Then maybe you should stop making enemies. He laughed, but it was bitter. In this world, breathing is enough to make enemies. A knock at the door interrupted them. Marco entered, his expression grim. Boss, we found something. Matteo stood immediately. What? Financial records. From the warehouse fires. They all trace back to a shell company. Whose shell company? Marco hesitated. That's the problem. The ownership is buried under so many layers we can't trace it. But there's one name that keeps appearing in the paperwork. A lawyer, Anthony Russo. Matteo's expression darkened. Russo. He's worked for the Caruso family for years. The same Caruso family whose head died at the meeting, Adriana said quietly. Yes. Matteo's mind was clearly racing. Which means either Enzo was behind this and got killed by his own plan, or someone set him up to take the fall. Or, Adriana said slowly, someone in his family is playing a different game. Both men turned to look at her. Enzo had a son, she continued, remembering the conversations she'd overheard at various events. Lorenzo. I've heard the other wives talk about him. They say he's ambitious, reckless. Lorenzo Caruso. Matteo's eyes narrowed. He was at the meeting. He survived. And with his father dead, he inherits everything, Marco added. Silence fell over the office as the implications sank in. It could be a setup, Matteo said finally, making it look like Lorenzo is behind this to turn us against him. Or it could be exactly what it looks like, Adriana countered. A son tired of waiting for his inheritance, willing to burn down the city to take what he thinks is his. Matteo studied her for a long moment. When did you get so good at this? I pay attention. You taught me to. She stood, moving to the window. Outside, guards patrolled the perimeter, ever vigilant. So what do? We investigate. Carefully. Matteo moved to stand beside her. If Lorenzo is behind this, we need proof before we move against him. If he's innocent, we need to know who's setting him up. And in the meantime, we stay alert. We trust no one. His hand found hers, their fingers intertwining naturally now. And we survive. Adriana looked down at their joined hands, her slender fingers wrapped in his larger ones, both of them stained by the world they inhabited. When had this become normal? When had his touch become something she sought out rather than endured? Matteo, she said quietly, if Lorenzo is behind this, he'll come after you. After us. I know. And you're not afraid? He turned to face her fully, his free hand coming up to cup her face. I'm terrified. But not for me. For you. The confession hung between them, raw and honest. Adriana's breath caught. I can take care of myself, she said. I know you can. You've proven that over and over. His thumb brushed across her cheekbone. But that doesn't mean I'm not going to try to protect you anyway. They stood there in the fading evening light, close enough to kiss, the air between them charged with something neither seemed ready to name. Adriana felt her heart hammering, felt the heat of his body, smelled the familiar scent of his cologne. This wasn't part of the plan, wasn't part of the transaction. She wasn't supposed to feel anything for him beyond fear or resentment or carefully calculated cooperation. But she did. She felt something shifting, changing, growing between them like a plant breaking through concrete. I should go, she said, her voice barely a whisper. Stay. Matteo's voice was rough. Please, just stay. So she did. They stood together at the window, hands joined, watching the sun set over a city that wanted them dead, both of them trying to pretend they didn't feel the ground shifting beneath their feet. The proof came 3 days later in a manila envelope delivered to the estate gates. No return address. No note. Just photographs and bank records that painted a damning picture. Matteo spread them across his desk while Adriana watched, her stomach tightening with each new revelation. Lorenzo Caruso meeting with known arsonists. Wire transfers from shell companies to offshore accounts. Emails discussing accelerating the timeline and eliminating obstacles. It's him, Marco said grimly. Has to be. But Matteo's expression was troubled. It's too clean, too convenient. What do you mean? Adriana asked. I mean, Someone wanted us to find this, wanted us to see exactly what they wanted us to see. He picked up one of the photographs. Lorenzo shaking hands with a man outside a warehouse. This was taken with a telephoto lens, professional grade, same as the photo of you in the garden. The connection sent ice down Adriana's spine. You think someone's setting up Lorenzo the same way they threatened me? I think someone is very good at manipulating people into doing exactly what they want. Matteo's jaw tightened. The question is why? What do they gain from us going after Lorenzo? A war between the De Luca and Caruso families, Marco suggested. With Enzo dead, Lorenzo would inherit, kill him too, and the Caruso empire crumbles. Creates a power vacuum. Or, Adriana said slowly, it removes the two families most capable of fighting back against whoever's really pulling the strings. Both men turned to stare at her. Think about it, she continued, her mind racing. The Antonellas control gambling, but they're old, set in their ways. The Marinos have the ports, but they're stretched thin. The De Lucas and Carusos are the real power players. Get them to destroy each other, and whoever's behind this can sweep in and take control without firing a shot. Matteo's eyes narrowed. You're thinking like one of them now. You taught me to. She met his gaze steadily. So what do we do? We need to talk to Lorenzo before anyone else moves against him. Matteo pulled out his phone. If he's innocent, he needs to know someone's setting him up. If he's guilty, he left the sentence unfinished. And if it's a trap, Marco asked, then we spring it carefully. Matteo's smile was cold. Set up a meeting, neutral ground, heavy security, and make sure everyone knows that if anything happens to me, there are sealed envelopes that go to every family in the city. Insurance, Adriana murmured. Survival. Matteo looked at her. You're staying here. This is too dangerous. No. The word came out before she could stop it. Matteo's eyebrows rose. No? He repeated. If Lorenzo is innocent and scared, he's not going to trust you alone. But a couple? Newlyweds who also lost someone at that meeting? Adriana forced herself to sound confident even though her heart was racing. I'm your insurance, remember? You're proof that this is about peace, not power. She's right, Marco said reluctantly. Lorenzo's young, emotional. He might respond better to her than to you. Matteo was silent for a long moment, his expression unreadable. Finally, he nodded. Fine, but you don't leave my side. Not for a second. The meeting was set for the following evening at a restaurant Lorenzo's family owned, technically neutral ground since Lorenzo hadn't officially taken control yet. Adriana dressed carefully, choosing a deep green dress that was elegant but not ostentatious. She was learning the language of clothing in this world, how every choice sent a message. You look beautiful, Matteo said when she emerged. He wore a black suit that made him look like sin and danger combined. I look like a pawn being moved across a chessboard, she replied. A queen, maybe. His hand found the small of her back as they headed for the car. Pawns don't get to make the kind of moves you've been making. The restaurant was in Little Italy, all red check tablecloths and the smell of garlic and wine. But the armed men stationed at every exit reminded Adriana this wasn't a social dinner. Lorenzo Caruso was already seated when they arrived. He was younger than Adriana expected, maybe 30, with dark hair and his father's sharp features. But where Enzo had carried himself with authority, Lorenzo looked hunted, exhausted. His eyes were shadowed, his hands restless on the table. Matteo, he said as they approached. His gaze flicked to Adriana. Mrs. De Luca. Lorenzo. Matteo's voice was carefully neutral as they sat. Thank you for meeting us. Did I have a choice? Lorenzo's laugh was bitter. 3 families think I murdered my own father. The others are waiting to see which way the wind blows before they decide whether to kill me or do business with me. Did you? Matteo asked bluntly. Did I murder my father? Lorenzo's voice rose. Are you insane? He was the only person in this world who gave a damn about me. Someone's been moving money, hiring arsonists, setting fires. Matteo laid out the evidence like cards on a table. And it all points to you. Lorenzo stared at the photographs, his face draining of color. I've never seen any of this. Those accounts aren't mine. That man, I don't know who he is. Someone knows how to create very convincing forgeries. Adriana said quietly. Both men looked at her. The photographs could be doctored, she continued, the bank records fabricated. If someone wanted to frame Lorenzo, this is exactly what it would look like. Or he's lying, Matteo said, though his tone suggested he didn't quite believe it. I'm not lying. Lorenzo's fist hit the table. Why would I kill my own father? What do I gain? His empire, his power, his seat at the table. Matteo's voice was hard. I already had all of that. He was grooming me to take over. I just had to wait. Lorenzo's eyes were wild now, desperate. But someone didn't want me to wait. Someone wanted him dead and me blamed for it. Who? Adriana asked gently. I don't know. I've been trying to figure it out for weeks. Lorenzo ran his hands through his hair. Ever since the first warehouse burned, things have been wrong. Strange men asking questions, money moving without my authorization. My father was investigating it when his voice broke. For a moment, he looked less like a potential crime lord and more like a son who'd lost his father. Adriana felt something shift in her chest. She'd been so focused on survival, on playing her role, that she'd forgotten these were real people with real grief and real fear. Lorenzo, she said softly, if you're innocent, we can help you, but you have to help us first. Tell us everything you know. He looked at her like she'd thrown him a lifeline. Then he started talking. The story that emerged over the next hour was one of manipulation and misdirection. Lorenzo had noticed the irregularities months ago. Small things at first, then larger ones. His father had been investigating, quietly, trying not to alarm the other families. But someone had been watching, waiting. And when the opportunity came at that meeting, they'd struck. My father's security chief disappeared the day before the meeting, Lorenzo said. The man who replaced him was new, recommended by someone my father trusted. But after the attack, he vanished too. Who recommended him? Matteo demanded. I don't know. The records were destroyed in a fire at our office building last week. Lorenzo's hands shook as he reached for his wine glass. Someone is systematically erasing any trail that might lead back to them. Not someone, Adriana said. Multiple someones. This is too coordinated for one person. Matteo nodded slowly. A conspiracy. Inside the families. But who? Lorenzo asked. Who benefits from chaos? Someone who wants to rebuild the power structure from scratch, Matteo said. Someone who's been planning this for a long time. A sound from outside cut off further conversation. Shouting. Then gunfire. Matteo was on his feet instantly, pulling Adriana behind him. Get down! The restaurant's windows exploded inward in a shower of glass. Bullets tore through the air, splintering wood and shattering wine bottles. Adriana hit the floor hard, Matteo's body covering hers. They found us! Lorenzo shouted over the chaos. No, Matteo said grimly. They were told where to find us. More gunfire. Marco and the other guards returned fire, but they were outnumbered. Adriana could hear men approaching from multiple directions, coordinated, professional. There's a back exit, Lorenzo said. Through the kitchen. Could be a trap, Marco warned. Staying here is definitely a trap. Matteo pulled Adriana to her feet. Move. They ran, staying low, bullets chasing them across the restaurant floor. The kitchen was chaos, staff screaming and diving for cover. Lorenzo led them through a maze of stainless steel and fire, toward a door that opened onto an alley. They burst outside into darkness. A van screeched around the corner, men with automatic weapons leaning out. Run! Matteo shoved Adriana forward. She ran, her heels abandoned somewhere in the restaurant, her bare feet slapping against wet pavement. Behind her, she could hear gunfire, shouting, the sounds of violence that had become horrifyingly familiar. A hand grabbed her arm. She screamed, twisting, ready to fight. It's me! Marco pulled her into a doorway as bullets chewed up the wall beside them. Stay down! Matteo and Lorenzo dove in after them, both bleeding from minor wounds. Matteo's face was a mask of cold fury. How many? He demanded. At least a dozen, Marco reported. Professional, military-grade weapons. This wasn't opportunistic. This was planned. Matteo pulled out his phone, his fingers flying across the screen. They knew we'd be here, knew exactly when and where. The meeting was set up less than 24 hours ago, Lorenzo said. Only our inner circles knew. which means someone in your inner circle or mine talked. Mateo's voice was ice. Someone sold us out. A new sound cut through the night. Sirens. Police. Coming fast. We need to move, Marco said. Now. They ran again through alleys and side streets, the sounds of pursuit fading behind them. Mateo led them to a parking garage 3 blocks away where a nondescript sedan waited. Get in, he ordered. Adriana climbed into the back seat, her whole body shaking with adrenaline. Mateo slid in beside her while Marco took the wheel and Lorenzo rode shotgun. Where are we going? Lorenzo asked. Somewhere safe. Mateo pulled Adriana close, checking her for injuries. Are you hurt? No, I don't think so. Her voice was shaking. Mateo, what's happening? We're being hunted. His jaw was tight. And we need to figure out by who before they finish the job. The safe house was different from the last one. Smaller, more hidden, buried in a neighborhood that looked abandoned. Inside it was sparse but functional. Mateo immediately started making calls, his voice low and urgent. Lorenzo collapsed onto a couch, looking shell-shocked. Marco stood guard by the door. Adriana found herself in a small bathroom, staring at her reflection. Her makeup was smeared, her hair a mess, her dress torn. She looked like someone who'd been through a war. Maybe she had been. She cleaned up as best she could with the limited supplies available, then returned to find Mateo still on the phone, pacing like a caged animal. I don't care what it costs, he was saying. I want to know who leaked our location. Check everyone who knew. I don't care if they've been with us for 20 years. Check them. He hung up and immediately dialed another number. Mateo, Adriana said softly. He held up a hand, listening to whoever answered. Vincent, we have a problem. She couldn't hear the other end of the conversation, but she saw Mateo's expression darken. No, we were set up. Someone knew exactly where we'd be. A pause. I don't know who yet, but I'm going to find out. And when I do, they're going to wish they'd never been born. He ended the call and threw the phone onto a table. Vincent? Adriana asked. His warehouses are being hit again, tonight, while we were busy getting shot at. Mateo's hands curled into fists. This is coordinated. Someone's moving against all of us simultaneously. Not someone, Lorenzo said quietly. An organization. This takes resources, planning, money. And someone on the inside feeding them information, Mateo added. He looked at Lorenzo. Your security chief. Who recommended him? Lorenzo's brow furrowed. I told you, I don't know. My father handled it, but... He paused. There was someone he mentioned, someone he trusted, an old family friend who vouched for the guy. Who? Sal Benedetti. He's been with our family for 30 years. My father's most trusted advisor. Mateo and Marco exchanged glances. What? Lorenzo demanded. Sal Benedetti also does consulting work for the Marino family, Marco said. And the Antonellis. He's one of the few people who has access to multiple organizations. The implications hung heavy in the air. You think Sal is behind this? Lorenzo's voice was incredulous. He's like an uncle to me. He bounced me on his knee when I was a kid. Which makes him the perfect mole, Mateo said grimly. No one would suspect him. No one would question his loyalty. But why? Adriana asked. What does he gain? Maybe nothing. Mateo started pacing again. Maybe he's working for someone else. Someone with enough money and power to buy loyalty from a trusted advisor. We need proof, Lorenzo said. We can't just accuse him without proof. Then we get proof. Mateo pulled out his phone again. I know someone who can dig into Benedetti's finances. Find out if he's been getting payments from anywhere unusual. While Mateo made arrangements, Adriana sat beside Lorenzo. The young man looked devastated, the weight of betrayal crushing him. I'm sorry, she said quietly. About your father. About all of this. Are you? Lorenzo's smile was bitter. You barely know me. You're only here because Mateo dragged you into it. I'm here because someone is trying to destroy all of us, Adriana corrected, and because I know what it's like to feel like the whole world is against you. Lorenzo looked at her properly for the first time. The runaway bride. I heard the stories. I'm sure you did. Adriana smiled sadly. sold into marriage, tried to escape on her wedding night. Real fairy tale stuff. And now? Now I'm trying to survive long enough to figure out what comes next. She glanced at Matteo, who was deep in conversation with someone. He's not what I expected. None of this is. Welcome to the family business, Lorenzo said, where nothing is ever what it seems and everyone wants to kill you. Matteo returned, his expression grim. My contact will have information by morning. Until then, we stay here. We stay alert, and we don't trust anyone outside this room. What about your men? Lorenzo asked. The ones who came with us? Marco I trust with my life. The others are being vetted as we speak. Matteo's eyes were hard. If there's a traitor in my organization, they won't live long enough to regret it. The night stretched long and tense. Adriana found herself unable to sleep despite her exhaustion. She stood at a window overlooking the empty street, watching shadows and wondering which ones might contain men with guns. Matteo appeared beside her, close enough that she could feel the heat of his body. You should rest, he said quietly. So should you. I will, when this is over. He was silent for a moment. I'm sorry I brought you into this. Tonight, in the restaurant, when the shooting started, I thought I might lose you. The rawness in his voice made her turn to face him. But you didn't. Not this time. His hand came up to cup her face, his thumb brushing her cheekbone. Adriana, I need you to understand something. When I married you, you were supposed to be a means to an end, a way to legitimize my position. Nothing more. I know. But somewhere along the way, that changed. His eyes searched hers. You changed it. You stopped being a transaction and became... He paused, struggling for words. Someone I can't afford to lose. Adriana's breath caught. Matteo, I'm not asking you to love me. I'm not even asking you to forgive me for forcing you into this life. His voice was rough. But I need you to know that if something happens to me, there are provisions, money, protection. You'll be taken care of. Don't talk like that. I have to, because the reality is that we might not survive this. And if I go down, I need to know you'll be safe. Adriana felt tears sting her eyes. When had this happened? When had she started caring whether this dangerous, complicated man lived or died? You're not going to die, she said fiercely. We're going to figure out who's behind this, and we're going to stop them. Together. Together, Matteo repeated, something like wonder in his voice. When did you start thinking of us as we? I don't know. Maybe when you covered me with your own body while bullets were flying. Maybe when you defended me against your father. Maybe when you gave me that phone even though you didn't have to. She reached up, her hand covering his where it rested against her cheek. I didn't choose this marriage, but I'm choosing to fight for it now. For us. Matteo's other hand came up, framing her face. You're the bravest person I've ever met. Or the stupidest. Maybe both. His smile was soft, genuine. Adriana, A crash from outside cut off whatever he'd been about to say. Both of them spun toward the window. Marco was already moving, weapon drawn. Get back! The front door exploded inward. Men poured through. 6, 7, 8 of them. Professional. Armed. Moving with military precision. Upstairs! Matteo shoved Adriana toward a staircase. Now! She ran, her heart hammering, Matteo right behind her. Behind them, gunfire erupted. She heard Marco shouting, Lorenzo cursing, the sounds of violence filling the small house. They reached the second floor. Matteo pulled her into a bedroom, slamming the door and shoving a dresser in front of it. Window, he said. We go out the window. It's 2 stories up. Better than staying here to die. He was already opening it, looking down at the alley below. There's a dumpster. We aim for it. Are you insane? Probably. He grabbed her hand. But it's our only chance. Trust me. Adriana looked into his eyes, those dark, intense eyes that had terrified her on their wedding night and now made her feel safer than she'd ever felt in her life. I trust you, she said. Footsteps pounded up the stairs. The bedroom door shuddered under impact. Jump, Matteo commanded. They jumped together, hands clasped, falling through darkness toward an uncertain landing. Adriana hit the dumpster hard, the impact driving the air from her lungs. Matteo landed beside her, already pulling her up. Move! They scrambled out, dropping to the alley floor just as gunfire erupted from the window above. Matteo dragged her into the shadows, running again, always running. Behind them, she could hear their pursuers following, relentless. They burst onto a main street. A taxi was approaching. Matteo stepped directly into its path. The driver slammed on the brakes, cursing. $500 to drive, Matteo said, pulling bills from his pocket. No questions. The driver's eyes widened at the money. Get in! They dove into the back seat. The taxi peeled away just as armed men rounded the corner behind them. Where to? The driver asked, his hand shaking on the wheel. Matteo gave him an address Adriana didn't recognize. Then he pulled out his phone and dialed. Marco, talk to me. A pause. His face went pale. How bad? Another pause. Get him to a hospital, use the emergency protocols. He hung up, his jaw tight. What happened? Adriana asked. Marco's hit. Lorenzo too. Both alive but wounded. Matteo's voice was hollow. The house is compromised. Everyone we left behind is either dead or captured. How did they find us? I don't know. But this confirms it. We have a traitor. Someone who knows our safe houses, our protocols, our movements. He looked at her, his expression bleak. We can't trust anyone. We're completely alone. The taxi dropped them at a hotel in the business district. Expensive, anonymous, the kind of place where people minded their own business. Matteo paid cash for a room, and they took the stairs to the 8th floor. The room was impersonal, generic. Matteo immediately swept it for bugs or cameras, while Adriana collapsed onto the bed, her whole body shaking. Clear, he said finally. He sat beside her, close, but not touching. We should be safe here. For tonight, at least. And tomorrow? Tomorrow we figure out our next move. He ran his hands through his hair, exhaustion finally showing through the armor. I'm sorry, Adriana. I brought you into this, put you in danger. I should have left you at the estate where you'd be safe. They had photographs of me at the estate, remember? Nowhere is safe. She turned to face him. And you didn't bring me into this. I chose to come. I chose to help Lorenzo. I chose to jump out of that window with you. Why? The question was raw. Why would you choose any of this? Because 6 weeks ago, you gave me a choice when you didn't have to. You let me run. You caught me. And then you gave me my own room and space and small freedoms when you could have taken everything. She reached for his hand. You're not perfect, Matteo. You're a killer and a criminal, and you've done terrible things. But you're not the monster you think you are, and I'm not going to let you face this alone. Matteo stared at their joined hands, his expression unreadable. Then, slowly, he brought her hand to his lips, pressing a kiss to her knuckles. I don't deserve you, he said quietly. Probably not, but you're stuck with me anyway. She smiled, trying to lighten the moment. For better or worse. Isn't that what we promised? I don't remember there being this much gunfire in the vows. It was implied. He laughed. A real laugh this time, not bitter or cold. You're impossible. So I've been told. They sat in silence for a while, hands joined, processing everything that had happened. Outside, the city continued its indifferent rhythm, unaware that somewhere in its shadows, a war was being waged for control of its criminal heart. Finally, Matteo spoke. We need to find Benedetti. If he is the traitor, he's our only link to whoever's orchestrating this. And if we find him, then we make him talk. Matteo's voice was hard again. Whatever it takes. Adriana knew she should be horrified by the implication, should protest the violence he was proposing, but she'd seen too much, survived too much. The woman who'd run on her wedding night was gone, replaced by someone harder, someone who understood that in this world, survival required difficult choices. Tomorrow, she said. We'll figure it out tomorrow. Tonight, we rest. Matteo nodded. He moved to stand, but Adriana's hand tightened on his. Stay, she said softly. Please, I don't want to be alone tonight. For a moment, he just looked at her. Then he nodded, kicking off his shoes and lying beside her on top of the covers. Not intimate, not sexual, just close. Adriana curled against his side, her head on his shoulder. His arm came around her, holding her secure. "I've got you," he murmured into her hair. "I won't let anything happen to you." "I know." And for the first time since this nightmare began, Adriana felt safe enough to close her eyes and sleep. Morning came with harsh sunlight and the buzz of Mateo's phone. He extracted himself carefully from where Adriana had curled against him during the night, her warmth lingering on his shirt. She stirred but didn't wake as he moved to the window, pressing the phone to his ear. "Talk to me," he said quietly. The voice on the other end belonged to his financial investigator. Mateo listened, his expression growing darker with each word. When he finally hung up, his hands were shaking with barely controlled rage. Adriana sat up, rubbing sleep from her eyes. "What is it?" "Sal Benedetti has been receiving monthly payments from an offshore account for the past 18 months. $200,000. Every month. Like clockwork." Mateo's voice was ice. "And 3 days ago, he withdrew everything, over $4 million, and disappeared. He ran. Or he's about to make his final move." Mateo turned to face her. "My contact traced the offshore account. It's registered to a corporation in the Cayman Islands. And that corporation is owned by someone we know." "Who?" Mateo's expression was bleak. "My father." The words hung in the air like a death sentence. Adriana felt her stomach drop. "Salvatore?" she whispered. "Your father is behind all of this?" "It makes perfect sense." Mateo's laugh was hollow, broken. "He never wanted to retire. He told me I was weak for wanting peace instead of war. He thinks I've gone soft, that I'm not worthy of the DeLuca name." His fist slammed into the wall. "So he decides to engineer a war. Force me to become the monster he always wanted me to be, or watch everything I've built burn to the ground." Adriana crossed to him, her hand on his arm. "Mateo, Benedetti was his man all along, planted in multiple organizations to gather intelligence. The warehouse fires, the attacks, the meeting, all orchestrated to destabilize the families and force them into conflict." Mateo's voice cracked. "And I walked right into it, trusted the wrong people, put you in danger because I was too blind to see my own father was playing me." "You couldn't have known." "I should have. I know what he's capable of. I've always known." He looked at her, his eyes dark with pain and fury. "He told me you'd be my weakness. He was right. Every move I've made to protect you, every choice to pursue peace instead of violence, it all fed into his plan." "So what do we do?" Adriana asked quietly. "Run? Hide? Give up?" "No." The word was hard, final. "We end this. Tonight. We find Benedetti, we get proof of my father's involvement, and we expose him to every family in the city. If he wants a war, he'll get one, but not the war he planned." Mateo made a series of calls, his voice cold and controlled as he mobilized resources. Marco was out of the hospital, wounded but functional. Lorenzo was recovering, furious and ready for revenge. Vincent, Antonelli, and the other family heads were willing to listen, barely, if Mateo could provide proof. "Benedetti has a house on the outskirts of the city," Mateo told Adriana as he checked weapons with mechanical efficiency. "Old family property, isolated. If he's anywhere, he's there. And if it's a trap, then we spring it." He handed her a small pistol. "Do you know how to use this?" Adriana stared at the weapon. 6 weeks ago, she'd been a normal woman living a normal life. Now she was holding a gun and preparing to raid a house with her crime lord husband. "No," she admitted. "Safety here. Point and pull. Center mass. Don't hesitate." His hands covered hers, guiding her through the motions. "I don't want you to have to use it, but if someone threatens you, I need to know you'll fight back." "I will." She met his eyes. "I'm done running, Mateo. From this life. From your enemies. From whatever we're becoming." Something fierce and protective blazed in his expression. He pulled her close, his lips crashing against hers in a kiss that was nothing like their wedding ceremony. This was desperate, hungry, real, a promise and a goodbye wrapped into one moment. When they broke apart, both breathing hard, Mateo rested his forehead against hers. "When this is over," he said quietly, "I'm going to court you properly. Ask you on dates, treat you the way you should have been treated from the beginning." When this is over, Adriana replied, I'm going to say yes. The house stood alone at the end of a long gravel drive, surrounded by overgrown gardens and the skeletal remains of what had once been ornamental hedges. Matteo killed the engine 100 yards out, and they approached on foot, Marco and 3 other trusted men flanking them. Lights burned in the windows. Someone was home. 2 guards at the front, Marco whispered, pointing. Probably more inside. We go in quiet, Matteo decided. Subdue the guards. Find Benedetti. Get what we need. It should have worked. They moved like shadows, Marco taking down the first guard silently, while another of Matteo's men handled the second. The front door was locked, but not reinforced. One well-placed kick, and they were inside. The house was elegant but dated, full of heavy furniture and the smell of cigar smoke. They cleared the first floor room by room, finding it empty. Voices drifted from upstairs. Matteo signaled for silence. They climbed the stairs, weapons drawn, every sense on high alert. The voices were coming from a study at the end of the hall. The door stood partially open, lamplight spilling out. Told you this would work, a voice was saying. Sal Benedetti. The boy's too soft, too concerned with peace and legitimacy. He'll never see it coming. And the girl? Another voice, deeper, familiar. Adriana felt Matteo stiffen beside her. Collateral damage, Benedetti replied. Once Matteo's dead, she's irrelevant, though she might fetch a decent price if we sell her to the right buyer. Pretty thing like that. Matteo's hand tightened on his gun, his whole body vibrating with rage. We move now, he whispered to Marco. I want Benedetti alive. The other one too. They burst through the door in a coordinated rush. Benedetti barely had time to reach for his weapon before Marco had him pinned against the wall, gun to his temple. The other man turned, hands raised in surrender. Adriana's blood ran cold. It wasn't Salvatore De Luca sitting in that leather chair. It was her father. Dad? The word came out strangled, disbelieving. Thomas Vale looked older than she remembered, his face haggard and desperate. But his eyes, those were the same eyes that had looked at her with love when she was a child, and calculation when he'd signed her over to Matteo. Adriana, he said, attempting a smile. Sweetheart, I can explain. Explain? Matteo's voice was deadly soft. He crossed the room in 3 strides, his gun pressed under Thomas's chin. Explain how you've been working with Benedetti to destroy the families? Explain how you sold your daughter and then tried to have her killed? Please, I'm dying to hear this. It wasn't supposed to go like this, Thomas said quickly, sweat beading on his forehead. It was just supposed to be business. A way to clear my debts and make some money on the side. By feeding Benedetti information about me, Adriana said, the pieces clicking into place with sickening clarity. You told him about my routines, my security, where I'd be and when. You were never supposed to get hurt, Thomas protested. The attacks were aimed at Matteo, not you. You were just... Collateral damage, Adriana finished, her voice hollow. That's what he said. That's what I am to you. What I've always been. Matteo's finger tightened on the trigger. Give me one reason not to kill you right now. Because he's my father, Adriana said quietly. Everyone turned to look at her. She stood in the doorway, the gun Matteo had given her held loosely at her side, her face pale, but composed. He's a traitor and a coward, and he sold me like property, she continued, her voice steady. But if you kill him, you're letting him off easy. He doesn't get to escape what he's done. Adriana, please, Thomas started. Shut up. Her voice cracked like a whip. You don't get to talk to me. You don't get to call me sweetheart or daughter or anything else. You gave up that right when you traded me for money. She turned to Matteo. We need him alive. We need his testimony about who else is involved. Because if Benedetti has been taking money from somewhere, it wasn't just for my father's gambling debts. Matteo studied her for a long moment, then slowly lowered his gun. You're right. He looked at Marco. Secure them both. We're taking them somewhere we can have a proper conversation. The warehouse was one of Matteo's legitimate holdings, used for importing electronics. At 3 a.m, it was deserted except for the assembled family heads who'd answered his urgent summons. Vincent Antonelli, Carlo Marino, and the others sat in a semicircle of chairs while Benedetti and Thomas Vale were zip-tied to chairs in the center. Matteo stood before them like a prosecutor presenting evidence, Adriana at his side. For months, someone has been orchestrating attacks against our families, Matteo began, burning warehouses, killing our people, turning us against each other. Tonight, we found out who. He gestured to Benedetti. Sal Benedetti, trusted advisor to the Caruso family and consultant to most of yours, paid over $4 million over 18 months to be a mole, to gather intelligence and use it to destabilize us. That's a lie, Benedetti snarled. I've served these families faithfully for 30 years. Save it. Matteo pulled out his phone, playing a recording. Benedetti's voice filled the warehouse, discussing payment schedules, attack plans, which families to target, and when. The assembled men's faces grew darker with each word. And his partner, Matteo continued, turning to Thomas Vale, the man who provided information about my household, about my wife, about our security protocols, the same man who sold his daughter to clear his debts, and then tried to have her killed when she became inconvenient. Adriana forced herself to look at her father. He was crying now, pathetic and small. I never meant for it to go this far, Thomas whimpered. I just needed the money. The debts were crushing me. When Sal approached me, said he could help. Who was paying you? Vincent demanded. Who's behind this? I don't know, Thomas's voice rose desperately. I swear I never met them. Sal handled everything. The money came through offshore accounts. I never knew who... Liar. Benedetti's voice was cold. Tell them who really orchestrated this. A heavy silence fell over the warehouse. Tell them, Benedetti repeated, or I will. Thomas's face crumpled. It was supposed to be a partnership, a way to consolidate power, reorganize the families under new leadership, more modern, more efficient. Whose leadership? Matteo's voice was ice. A consortium, Thomas said weakly. Business people, legitimate investors who wanted access to your infrastructure, your networks. They said they could bring in hundreds of millions if the old guard was removed, if there was new blood in charge. Corporate raiders, Carlo said with disgust, trying to buy their way into our world. And you were helping them, Vincent said to Benedetti. You were going to sell us out to outsiders. I was going to save us from extinction, Benedetti shouted. You're all dinosaurs. The world is changing. Either we adapt or we die. These people, they have money and power beyond anything we could imagine. With their backing, we could have built an empire that would have lasted generations. Built on betrayal, Matteo said quietly. Built on the bodies of people like Enzo Caruso, like the men who died at that meeting, like my wife, who you tried to murder. But he turned to the assembled family heads. This is what I've been trying to tell you. The old ways, the constant warfare, the paranoia, the blood feuds, they make us vulnerable. They let people like Benedetti and these corporate vultures see us as easy prey. We need to be united. We need to be strong, or they'll pick us apart one by one. Vincent stood, walking over to where Benedetti sat. Without warning, he backhanded the older man across the face. 30 years, Vincent said softly. 30 years I trusted you, brought you into my home, introduced you to my family, and you were selling us out the entire time. What do we do with them? Carlo asked. Matteo looked at Adriana. She met his gaze steadily. My father gets turned over to the police, she said, with enough evidence of his fraud and conspiracy to put him away for 20 years. He wants to live? Let him rot in a cell, knowing he destroyed his own daughter for money he never got to spend. And Benedetti? Vincent asked. That's your decision, Matteo said. He betrayed all of you. You should decide his fate. The family heads conferred in low voices. Adriana didn't want to hear the details of what they planned. Some things were better left unknown. What about the consortium? Carlo asked. These business people who wanted to buy their way in? I have their names, Matteo said. From Benedetti's records. We make it clear, very clear, that our world is not for sale. We shut down their operations in our territories. We make examples of anyone who worked with them, and we show them that the families, when united, are untouchable. United, Vincent repeated, looking around at the others. Is that what we are now? We could be, Matteo said, if we choose to be. If we decide that peace and cooperation serve us better than endless war. One by one, the family heads nodded. It wasn't love, it wasn't even friendship, but it was agreement, a fragile, temporary peace built on mutual survival. It was enough. The next 3 weeks were a whirlwind of reorganization and consolidation. Thomas Vale was arrested on multiple charges, his assets seized to pay his debts. The consortium members found their businesses mysteriously failing, their permits revoked, their operations shut down by coordinated pressure from the families. Benedetti simply disappeared, and no one asked questions about what had happened to him. Lorenzo Caruso, recovered from his wounds, officially took control of his family's operations. He proved to be a valuable ally, young and ambitious, but tempered by his brush with death and betrayal. Salvatore De Luca, when confronted with the evidence of the conspiracy and his name's complete absence from it, retreated to his estate in furious silence. He'd been wrong about his son. Matteo had proven stronger and more capable than the old man had ever given him credit for. And through it all, Adriana stood beside Matteo. Not as decoration, not as property, but as a partner who'd earned her place through courage and intelligence and a refusal to break under pressure. She was sitting in Matteo's office one evening, reviewing security reports, when he appeared with a bottle of wine and 2 glasses. "We need to talk," he said. Adriana's stomach tightened. Those words never meant anything good. "About what?" Matteo poured the wine, handing her a glass. 6 months. That was the deal we made. 6 months of loyalty in exchange for freedom. Your options. The words hung between them. Adriana had almost forgotten about their original agreement. So much had happened since then. "That was the deal," she agreed carefully. "It's been 7 weeks," Matteo said. "Not even 2 months. But I think you've more than fulfilled your end of the bargain. You've stood beside me through attacks and betrayal. You've proven yourself to every family in this city. You've earned your freedom." He pulled an envelope from his jacket, setting it on the desk between them. "Divorce papers," he said quietly. "Already signed on my end. There's also a bank account with $5 million. Enough for you to start over anywhere in the world. A new identity if you want it. Complete freedom from all of this." Adriana stared at the envelope like it was a snake. "You're letting me go," she said. "I'm giving you the choice I should have given you from the beginning." Matteo's voice was rough. "I forced you into this marriage, used you as a pawn in my plans, put your life in danger more times than I can count. The least I can do is let you walk away clean. And if I don't want to walk away?" The question seemed to catch him off guard. "What?" Adriana set down her wine glass and stood, moving around the desk until she was inches from him. "You asked me once when I started thinking of us as we," she said quietly. "I've been thinking about that. I think it was the night you defended me against your father, or maybe when you gave me my own room when you could have forced me into yours, or when you covered me with your own body during that first attack." She reached up, her hand cupping his face. "Or maybe it was earlier than that. Maybe it was when you caught me running and then let me go anyway because you refused to be the monster everyone expected you to be. Adriana, I didn't choose this marriage," she continued. "You're right about that. But somewhere along the way, I chose you. I chose to stand beside you. I chose to trust you. I chose to fall—" She paused, taking a breath. "I chose to fall in love with you." Matteo's eyes widened. "You can't mean that. It's Stockholm Syndrome, trauma bonding. You're confused." "I'm not confused," her voice was firm. "I know exactly what I feel. You're a criminal and a killer, and you've done terrible things. But you're also the man who gave me freedom when you didn't have to, who listened to my ideas, who trusted me to stand beside you when everyone else would have locked me away for safety. You're complicated and dangerous and sometimes terrifying, but you're also the best man I've ever known." "I don't deserve you," Matteo said, his voice breaking. "Probably not, but I'm choosing you anyway." She smiled. "So you can keep those divorce papers and that money, because I'm not going anywhere. Are you sure?" His hands came up to frame her face, his touch achingly gentle. "Because once you make this choice, once you decide to really be my wife, there's no going back. You'll be part of this world forever. All the danger, all the violence, all the impossible moral compromises, it never ends." "I know." Adriana's hands covered his. "And I'm choosing it anyway. I'm choosing you, not because I'm forced to, not because I'm afraid, but because I want to. Because when I imagine my future, you're in it. This life, this world, it's not what I expected, but it's mine now. We're mine now. Mateo's control finally broke. He kissed her like she was air and he was drowning, like she was the only solid thing in a world of chaos. Adriana kissed him back with equal desperation, equal need, pouring everything she felt into the connection between them. When they finally broke apart, both breathing hard, Mateo rested his forehead against hers. "I love you," he said quietly. "I didn't think I was capable of it, but you've turned my entire world upside down. You've made me want to be better, to build something that lasts instead of just surviving day to day." "Then let's build it," Adriana said. "Together, a real partnership, a real marriage." "A real marriage," Mateo echoed. His smile was soft, genuine, transformed his entire face. "Starting with a real wedding night?" Adriana laughed, the sound bright and free. "Starting with a real wedding night." He swept her into his arms, carrying her toward the door. She didn't protest, just wrapped her arms around his neck and held on. This was nothing like their first wedding night. No fear, no force, no transaction. Just two people who'd found each other in the chaos and chosen to hold on. 3 months later, Adriana stood in the gardens of the estate, watching the sun set over the city that had tried to destroy her and failed. The bruise on her cheek from Salvatore's slap had long since faded. Her father was in prison. The families were at peace, or as close to it as they were likely to get. And she was happy. The word felt strange, foreign, but true. Mateo appeared beside her, sliding an arm around her waist. "What are you thinking about?" "How far we've come," she said. 3 months ago, I was running from you. Now I can't imagine being anywhere else." "Regrets?" "None." She turned in his arms, looking up at him. "Well, maybe one. I wish we could have met under different circumstances. Normal circumstances." "Normal is overrated." He kissed her forehead. "Besides, I like our story. The runaway bride and the reluctant crime lord. It has a certain poetry to it." "We're starting a foundation," Adriana said suddenly. Mateo raised an eyebrow. "We are." "For women in situations like mine, women sold into marriages they don't want, women trapped by their families' debts." Her voice was firm, determined. "We're going to give them options, safe houses, legal help, education, everything I didn't have." "That's going to make us some enemies," Mateo warned. "A lot of the old families won't like it." "Let them not like it." Adriana's smile was sharp. "I'm a DeLuca now. They'll learn to deal with it." Pride blazed in Mateo's eyes. "Have I mentioned lately that you're terrifying?" "Not nearly enough." He laughed, pulling her close. "I'll work on that." They stood together as darkness fell, watching the city lights flicker to life one by one. Somewhere out there, enemies still plotted. Dangers still lurked. The world they inhabited would never be safe, never be simple, never be easy. But they would face it together. Not because they had to, because they chose to. The war around them hadn't ended. Wars in their world never truly did. But the battle between them, the struggle for power and control and dominance, that was over. They'd both surrendered, not in defeat, but in something far more powerful. In choice. In trust. In love. Adriana Vale had been sold into marriage as payment for her father's debts. She'd been a prisoner, a pawn, a target for assassination. But Adriana DeLuca was a queen who'd forged her crown in fire and claimed her throne through courage. She'd taken a forced marriage and transformed it into a real partnership. She'd looked at the monster everyone feared and seen the man beneath. And that man had looked at the bride who ran and seen someone worth chasing, not to capture, but to stand beside. "Come on," Mateo said, taking her hand. "Mrs. Castellano made dinner, something special," she said. "She's been making something special every night for a week," Adriana laughed. "I think she's hoping we'll give her a baby to spoil." "And?" Mateo's voice was carefully neutral. "How do you feel about that?" Adriana considered the question seriously. A year ago, she would have been horrified at the thought of bringing a child into this world of violence and danger. But now, looking at the empire they were building, one based on loyalty and protection rather than pure fear, she could see the possibilities. "Ask me again in a year," she said, "when the foundation is up and running, when things are more stable." "A year," Mateo agreed. I can work with that. They walked back to the house hand in hand, leaving the darkness of the gardens for the warmth and light of the home they'd built together. Behind them, the gates closed and locked, security systems engaging, guards taking their positions. The world outside those walls was brutal and unforgiving, but inside, they'd created something else. A sanctuary, a partnership, a love that had been forged in the crucible of survival and emerged stronger for it. Years later, when people told the story of Matteo and Adriana De Luca, they would speak of the bride who refused to bow and the crime lord who learned to kneel. They would talk about the foundation that changed countless lives, the peace that lasted a generation, the empire built on loyalty rather than fear. But those were just stories. The truth was simpler and more complex. Two people had been forced together by circumstance and cruelty, and instead of letting it destroy them, they'd chosen to forge something beautiful from the wreckage. They'd chosen each other. Not once, but over and over again. Every day, every challenge, every threat. And in the end, that choice, that daily recommitment to stand together, was the most powerful weapon they possessed. The estate lights glowed warm against the darkness as Adriana and Matteo disappeared inside, the door closing behind them. The guards continued their patrols. The city continued its restless sleep. And in the heart of it all, a love that began in chains had transformed into the truest freedom either of them had ever known. Not because the cage had opened, but because they decided together to tear it down from the inside.